Paul discussed effort to create policies such as the Communication and Video Accessibility Act and Section 508. He describes how testing and verification is critical to ensure that principles are put into practice to ensure accountability for result. Paul is an amazing person and has some incredible publications, including Watching TV, Blind, Alone, Hate, Relationship, and some of other publications as well. Well, he could be anything, a stand-up comedian, or he's just amazing. So this keynote, the particular session was very interactive. We talked to the people, answered their questions about accessibility, and it was a great experience meeting him in person. He was just amazing. So we had these 4 main workshops there. I have not attended all of them because they were in 4 different rooms and I couldn't clone myself. One was the Introduction to Accessibility Testing by Jan Wild. She's another Australian lady, amazing person and accessibility expert. She runs the Accessibility OZ organizations, and she's doing great stuff in accessibility testing. The workshop that I personally liked a lot, there was open source tools for evaluating and inspecting web accessibility, and that was done by Dr. John Gunderson, who is from University of Illinois. So it was very hands-on and interactive workshop. So in this workshop, participants were asked to use their own devices during the workshop to analyze websites of their own choice. And then they used the results as a discussion point of how the tools provide information on accessibility and discussed the strengths and limitations of automated testing results. They also discussed how the OpenAjax evaluation library is based on the HTML5 specification and ARIA authoring practice to meet YCAG 2.0 level A and level AA requirements. So they have used some tools, including A-Inspector, Slide Bar for Firefox. They use Functional Accessibility Evaluator, which provides accessibility information on an entire website for YCAG 2.0 level A and level AA success criteria. And they could generate the report for the entire website and for an individual page as well. They also use bookmarklets for accessibility visualization. Now, I think I have very limited time, so I won't go into the details, but I'll talk about some interesting stuff, particularly the panel discussion that we had there. So there were 3 panel discussions. One was the accessibility conformance testing panel discussion, harmonized accessibility testing, and that was organized by Shadi Abu Zara, who is from World Wide Web Consortium Web Accessibility Initiative. And then Wilco Fears from DQ Research, Alistair Garrison from Level Access, Katie Harito-Shi from DQ System, and Kathleen Wabin from Interactive Accessibility. So in this panel discussion, they talked about accessibility conformance testing task force. This task force is scoped to develop a specification for automated, semi-automated, and manual web accessibility testing procedures. There was another interesting panel discussion. Again, I have not attended all the panel discussions, but we talked in the evening during the happy hours, and I'll come to that part later. I'll talk to you about this interactive happy hour session. So another panel discussion was EPUB accessibility conformance testing and certification, and that was organized by George Kirscher, Avnish, Marisha from DAISY Consortium, Rachel from Macmillan Publishing, Charles Lapierre from Banatech, and Amy Mason from National Federation for the Blind. So in this panel, they discussed about the challenges that publishers are often not aware that YCAG applies to digital formats as well, like EPUB, or how to translate the page-centric nature of YCAG to a package multi-document format. Another one panel was accessibility testing, and that was presented by Anil Lewis from National Federation of Blind, and Matt Filman from Paciello Group, Cindy Roland from Utah State University, and Shadi Abuzara from WTLC. The interesting part was these papers, and some of those papers were really, really amazing. The very first, and then good part in the entire program, both the days. I mean, you met so many great people there from the federal government, including FBI, and that was the scary part though. So those papers I have listed out here, some of the major, one is the federal website, YCAG 2 compliance and accessibility trends, and that was presented by John Gunderson, which was very informative. So this was a very interesting paper about the federal website, accountability results. It is surprising that many federal websites have been out of compliance in the last 16 years since Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act has required web accessibility. And now the Section 508 regulations have been undergoing a refresh. You know, the original 508 was based on the YCAG 1.0, right, Jason? Right, and now we have the current version of 508 includes YCAG 2.0 as the appropriate technical standard for the website. It was interesting to see that some of the websites, the federal websites, they were really, really good, and their accessibility results were very positive. So apparently they're working on, they're following all the standards and making their sites accessible. There was another paper, Agile Accessibility, and Andres Nielsen and Tyler Matney, they talked about the development methodology. So either you follow the waterfall model or you follow Agile environment, you can still integrate your accessibility testing into your development process. That was pretty interesting. Our own Chris Ann, I'm sure most of you know Chris Ann. She was here in last meetup. She and Jessica and another team member, Taisha Hobbs, we presented integration, accessibility, and usability testing for educational content. And Chris Ann presented. She describes what is the process we follow here at ETS. So we do the manual testing, we do the automated testing, we follow we make sure that all our applications are keyboard accessible. She also talked about evaluating with the screen readers and refreshable breaks. So there was another paper, and actually this particular paper won the Best Paper Award. There was why usability testing should be part of your accessibility testing strategy. And it was good to see that people were advocating about usability with the accessibility, because it's a simple fact. I mean, you can follow all the YCAG guidelines, but your site is still not, maybe inaccessible. So you need to take care of the usability as well, and you make the usability as a part of the accessibility. So that was pretty good. He came up with pretty good data. And I'm sorry, did you say something, sir?
Mike?
Oh, all right. So Peter McNally was from Bentley University, and he presented some interesting data, very interesting data. I myself presented a paper on YCAG usability and design, and I made a case that usually, because I'm from the IT background and I've seen different teams working on different projects, and they do not consider accessibility as anything important. They take it as the last item in their plate. So I made a case that, and I gave several examples that accessibility should be, it's not just YCAG, but it's much more than that. And I explained that, for example, in the development process, and I was talking to a few people here, they're UI developer, or Michael is the Drupal developer, and they use so many open source widgets and libraries, and most of the time those widgets are not accessible. So even though we use them and we think that that will do our job, but that's not the case. And when we actually do the accessibility testing, we find a lot of issues, and it's really difficult to resolve them. So my case was to include accessibility testing in the beginning of the process, right from the time when you design any application. So that was my paper. Now these are some pictures here. This was one of the room, and I don't know if you recognize any of them, but believe me, they are the top brain, and all of them are accessibility expert. So you talk to anyone, and they know almost everything about accessibility. So it was great to know. I mean, talk to every one of them. This is Krisan. She was representing her paper, integrating accessibility and usability testing for education content. And it was me who was talking about. So now this session here, business card exchange. So that was a very interesting session where it was for 1 hour, actually more than 1 hour. And Chris Law invited all the people who were interested into that session. So we went there and we met, all the people, all the stakeholders, and we talked about their business. We talked about what are the standards or what are the process that they follow during in their accessibility testing. We also got to know that some of the people are, even though they're like small organization, 2 or 3 people, but they are doing fantastic work in accessibility testing, and they are 24/7 busy. So that was something very interesting session. And then at the end of this session, of course, you make friends. Right after this session, everybody went to the happy hours where everybody was dancing like they don't belong to the technology or anything. They are just the professional dancer. That was good to see. These 3 awards that, like I said, Peter McNally from Bentley University, he won the Best Paper Award. Alistair Garrison from Level Access, he's a professional speaker, so he won Best Presentation. And then the student from Georgia Institute of Technology, he won the Best Student Paper. Now, what I have learned from that symposium. So, like I said, accessibility is not just conformance, it's much more than that. Also, people think that when you talk about the accessibility, it's a pretty boring job. It's not interesting, and often you ruin the design of the website. Well, this is not true. I mean, you can still make beautiful sites, beautiful accessible sites, if you plan it in advance, and you work with the UX designer, you make it a part of your usability, and like I said, you make it a part, in the process. So you can still create a beautiful design, beautiful web experience. And that was another takeaway, that you really should make it a part of your development process. Doesn't matter what process you are following, you can still make it a part of your process. Making great accessibility report. I forgot to mention about this person who was from University of Illinois, and his name was Tim Offenstein. He would call him as Honey Papa because his granddaughter calls him Honey, Papa, and his wife calls him Honey, so he was Honey Papa. He presented his paper, and that was pretty interesting, about this creating professional accessibility report. Well, you do the accessibility testing, but to summarize all the data, present it in a better way, and maintaining that report is another art. So he gave pretty good presentation there. And all these papers and then panel discussion, all these reports, you can actually check it on this link, ictaccessibilitytesting.org/program.html. So you'll find all the reports. Well, I guess now I have so many friends, so many experts, and I can proudly say that I know people from federal government, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and I know the best accessibility brain. They are doing tremendous work in accessibility. And I think I'm continuously in touch with them. If I have any problem, I talk to them, especially John Gunderson from the University of Illinois. He's technical expert. And I mean, it's just great. If you have any problem, you need any help, you can always talk to the people and can learn how are they doing things differently, and you can use that learning in your organization. Thank you.
Any other questions for Irfan before we move on? Speak now.
There is a question online, will the slides be available?
Those slides, yeah, I can make them available, sure. They are open. I can send the URL. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, from your trip, now, what kind of I guess what I'm trying to say is, sometimes I'll go to conferences and they'll give you materials and lessons and things, but sometimes it's difficult to implement them, or there was this other session you were going to and you realized that probably would have been worth your time. So I guess in a nutshell, like, where did you see or feel like your time was best spent, or like what areas did you get the most impact out of?
Right. So when you go to this kind of meetings or the conferences, you have all the agenda in advance. So you see what are the topics that you are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then attend those. You can't go to each and every session and attend everything. That's not possible because they are at the same time. So you make your own plan, see what is the beneficial for you, and what particular seminar or meeting you should attend. You make your own judgment.
All right.
All right. Well, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the next component.
Sure. One thing before I leave, one point I want to make here, those conferences, I mean, it's fun, of course, but they're pretty intense. So when you go there, you do not feel like you are on some holiday trip or something. You really need to be there because they're so important. And so right from 8 o'clock until 8 o'clock, we would talk to the people, and you don't know. I mean, by the time you realize, day is gone. You learn a lot, but at the same time, when you come back home, you feel like, oh my gosh, looks like you were in the gym working out for 2 days. So, but I think the knowledge that you get out of those conferences is incredible, very precious.
All right, thank you. So we're going to get into the kind of hands-on testing part, hopefully. If you were able to download the kind of testing matrix, you're welcome to follow along. If not, I'll step through everything I'm doing and do my best to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Just get that out of the caption area. Bless you. So the first site that we're going to look at is the any site at all? PrincetonNewJersey.gov. I don't mean to disparage PrincetonNewJersey.gov, but I have some things to show you that we might find interesting. The first thing we're going to look for is called Skip Domain. Skip Domain is like a welcome mat for people with disabilities. It's there, and I would say the absence of it, or the absence of a component that does something like that, is the opposite. It's the unwelcome mat. if you will. So I have an objective as a user. I want to get to this link right here that's called Affordable Housing for Purchase Available Now. I have an obstacle on my way as a keyboard user that I have 113 links.
You're skewing the captions with your...
I'm skewing the captions with
There you
my
go.
thing. I'm going to fix that accessibility issue. That was the first test. Thank you for passing it. Without a script domain, and let's see if this works too.
New Jersey, window, Princeton, New Jersey, web content as keyboard focus.
Coming up.
You are currently on web content. To enter the web area, press Control, Option, Shift, down arrow. Princeton, New Jersey, web content, link, / edit text, link, planning,
Still not there.
link,
Oh, and we're getting closer now. I'm in the side rail now.
link, visit, link, Princeton Affordable Housing,
There it is. So
voiceover off.
that was 113 links to get to the part of the main content that I want to get to. Now, if I navigate a way to get to there, and I want to now read the next item in there, I again have to go through 113 links. So how do we solve for that for people who use a screen reader or for use keyboard only? So this is a test that you can run, and I'm on the Princeton homepage, and I'll just hit the tab key. And the first thing that I see when I do that is script to main content. What that would do would deliver me past all the navigation items to the first element in the main region. Or the first, so if I want to get to where it says fall break, a time for service and off-campus for Princeton students, I can use my enter key to do that, and then the next thing that I tap to will be that article that I wanted to read. Okay? Now, there are a lot of items in the navigation for Princeton that you need too. There's 68 items I counted. There's a tool, I don't actually sit there and count them all. So there's 68 links in the navigation, and I might want to go to the next page to say admissions, for example, and get right to that piece of content that I navigated for. So that's something that you can do, any site that you get to me, one of the first things I would ever do for a disability test would be to hit the tab key. It's probably the fastest test that you can do, and it's one that tells you, has the site been optimized for accessibility, or hasn't it, or has it not? Okay? And let's take a quick look at why we do that. We do that for keyboard operability. There's a WCAG requirement that asks us to find a way to provide a mechanism to bypass blocks of information. The blocks of information that we're talking about are the main navigation, essentially. So we want to be able to get to the first element in the main region. Okay, and who's affected by that? Non-sighted users with screen readers, as I demonstrated, but also anyone using a keyboard only to access. So if we're using a sip and puff machine, if we're using a head-on or input-output switch, or an eye gaze tracker, like Prologue or something like Stephen Hawking has. Okay? Everything has to be available via keyboard. And if you're using that, having that skip domain is an essential feature for you. And let's also get into something called a keyboard trap. Okay, so this says that any element on a page that can be invoked with a keyboard has to have a way to be escaped also with a keyboard. So I cannot rely on a mouse and accessibility to do any one function alone. Okay, so I have the Inaccessible University website here, which I've already preloaded. And what this site is it's been developed by the University of Washington to give us the ACME, everything is broken. And then conversely, we have everything's been fixed. So we have the before and after. And it's a great way for you to get in there and exercise your testing skills. Okay, so as you learn new testing techniques, this is a great place to see if you could find those things apparent in here. So they've given us an example of a keyboard trap, and it's on the third click here link, which is another issue. Again, this site is riddled with everything that could be wrong with the website. So these links just say click here, click here, click here. Okay, they're uninformative. But if I do click this one, it pulls up a modal dialog. And if you're following along, my challenge to you is to get out of that without using a mouse. Okay, tab, return, escape, space, arrow. Those are the only things that I have available to me as a keyboard user, and none of them work. So this is a pure definition of keyboard trap. Okay, so I would have to hit with my mouse the OK button. All right. And now let's go take a look at how it's been handled correctly. So if I use that third link again on that page, I now get the same modal dialog, but now I can get out of this modal dialog by hitting Tab and Return. Okay. So we have the, again, it's under the WCAG principle of operability. This one is 2.1.2, no keyboard trap. It's a level A violation. Level A would be more fundamental in nature than level AA. So AA would be the more nuanced type of violation of the WCAG standard. And again, who's affected? I copied and pasted this from the cell above. It's non-sighted users with screen readers, and then people who use keyboard only to access content. And this is a fun one, language. I would like to be able to demonstrate that on Apple's voiceover technology on the desktop, but I cannot because of a bug, which I've logged with them to Apple Viz. A screen reader should change its language based on the language code that's present in the HTML markup when it's present. Okay? If it's not present, it wouldn't know to do it. But if it's present, JAWS, for example, will switch, and JAWS is a screen reader called Job Access with Speech. JAWS will correctly switch to the correct pronunciation and read it in its proper pronunciation. Right now, Apple has a bug where it's not doing that on the desktop, but it is doing that on mobile. And if you're new to accessibility testing, welcome, because this is the kind of life you're going to live from now on, where things work in one scenario, but not another. Okay? So we can test this one. If I pull up my bookmarks. So how I'm going to expose this is through something called a bookmarklet. Okay? And Irfan alluded to that earlier. And I've navigated to the page here that has this link in it. This is a weird way to install something, but you would click and drag it up into your bookmark menu. Okay, and then go to the page that you want to test, and just click that icon. What it's doing is running a JavaScript application, and here I can see that it says language attribute 0. So there is a defect present there that you should have the language of the page identified at the very least. But we also come down, and through a manual check, we can see that there is indeed Spanish on this page that's not been marked as Spanish. Okay. Now let's take that same test and run it on the fixed page. And you can see I have language attributes 3. So we're getting better. The first language attribute is on the page, which is correctly set as English. And then bienvenido and this paragraph below it is correctly wrapped in the ES language code, ES for Espanol. Okay? I would like to show you now the screener doing that correctly, but I cannot. So I'm going to be that person that pulls up their own blog. I'm sorry to do that. Watch my blog real quick, it's great. So I have done this here. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. This is a passage of French that's been not set with the language flag on one column, and then it has been set correctly. We'll hear the screen reader read Franglish and then French.
Il était effectué pendant que jour qui avait 3 petits cochons. Elle les aimait beaucoup, mais comme il n'y avait pas assez de nourriture pour qu'ils puissent tous manger à leur faim, elle les a envoyés tenter leur chance dans le vaste monde.
Now, what if you couldn't understand either?
Well, as we see, yeah, there you go. So the screen reader is able to, if you've wrapped the language correctly in the tag, or the attribute, given the attribute within the tag of the language attribute correctly, it will switch the language and start reading it correctly. That could be a pretty big deal if you have lots of passages of language, or as we found out in some of the work that we did at Princeton, you have a language assessment, okay? We made sure that all the Italian passages in the Italian assessment were set in the correct language, because otherwise a screen reader would be a very unfair experience for the screen reader user. Okay, this also translates over to Braille too, I believe. Let me ask my Braille experts. Did I just say a true thing? Language code should come over, like it should switch the Braille language. Can I get a mic?
Jason?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 2 Braille experts. Why would I guess?
It's not on.
Is it?
It's not.
Well, that could be my mic. Check. Here. Jason? Yes. There we go.
So, I mean, at least in principle, yes, it should be able to switch codes or switch from contracted to uncontracted. I'm not aware of any implementation of that, but there may be.
Excellent.
Like, you have any more?
No, I have no experience with it.
Well, you know they have no experience with it, you should do it anyway.
I should.
Just do the right thing, right? So the next thing we're going to look at is alternative text. This is probably something that most people are familiar with when we talk about accessibility. It is the first requirement. It's 1.1.1. It's probably one of the most fundamental requirements to accessibility. I'm also going to use a bookmarklet here on the inaccessible page. I will use the images bookmarklet. And so I'll click and drag images up into the piece here, which I've already done. And I'm going to run the images bookmarklet. And on the inaccessible page, I'm seeing all these images that have no alternative text on them. So that's a clear violation. If you have an image, there should either be alternative text on it, or we should mark it as decorative. Okay, so if I say mark something as decorative, it would be content that has no bearing, or an image that has no bearing on the content, that we actually want to suppress from the screen reader user. Okay, so we want them to be able to skip over it, because it's kind of detritus to them. So looking on my page, does anyone see something that might be considered detritus if I zoom in here? Kind of giving me a pretty good hint. I've zoomed in on the thing that I'm looking for.
No.
Yeah, so what's the alternative text? It's going to read horizontal line graphic. Okay? So there's 2 levels of violation here. Or, not violation, kind of, yeah, no, it's violation. So one, we shouldn't be tagging things that are decorative. So we can do that in 2 ways. We can use CSS to handle that, or we could just null out the attribute. And I should be really remiss to people on Twitter if I allowed you to walk out if you're calling these alt tags. You will be chastised and reprimanded on Twitter relentlessly if you call them alt tags. They're attributes. Don't you dare. Yeah, I'm getting a nod back there from Jackman. He'll personally chastise you on the way out of here if you call it an alt tag. It is it's an attribute of an element. Okay. So one, I've marked something to be read aloud that should be read aloud, and then 2, the other thing I did is a faux pas. Anyone want to call out what the faux pas is in this piece of alternative text? No. Jump out with it. I'm going to read it aloud. Sorry, it says horizontal line graphic. So I got 2 laughs. What's wrong with that? Anything?
It's not informative.
It's not informative, right? But it also says the word graphic in it. Okay? And what it's going to end up doing is kind of stuttering. So the JAWS screen reader is going to say graphic, horizontal line graphic. Okay? The voiceover is going to say horizontal line graphic, image. The screen reader is going to understand what the element is and then give that accessible name to people with disabilities. You don't have to, it's redundant. So even if you were going to put alternative text on this, that would still be the wrong alternative text to put on it. Okay? So let's take a look at the fixed page. How does this work better? Okay, so one, I have alternative text on images, which is great. So I've satisfied success criteria 1.1.1. I've got accessible university. I've got robot with friendly face assembled with various scraps of hardware mounted on an old desktop synthesizer. I've got next slide, previous slide. And those horizontal line graphics are gone. They use CSS to treat this one, but you could have also used the null set. So I could have put alt attribute quote quote. This is a more elegant solution than doing that. There's a lot of extra work to do the other way. Headings. I'm going to use my same solution here with the bookmarklet. And on the inaccessible page, I'm going to run the headings. And it says, no headings, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6 found. Okay? But you can clearly see that there are pieces of text here that are visually formatted to be a heading. What makes a heading look like a heading? Just shout out answers and I'll repeat them in the microphone. Size, the weight,
Separation.
its spatial relationship to other pieces of text,
The tag.
font, the
Tag.
that's what it should be. It should be semantically accurate, but here it's not. So what they've done is they've given all the visual attributes of the heading, but not the semantic understanding that it's a heading. So that's where the violation occurs. So let's take a look at if I run that same bookmarklet over here, I see I have an H1, I have this nice hidden H2, which is cool, because it's kind of giving me this curated experience, and it says featured story slideshow. And then all those pieces of text that were visually formatted to appear as text now have the semantic understanding of H1, H2, H3, H4, all the way through 6. Anything past 6 will just be read by a screener as a paragraph, I found. I put it in H7 now. I'm reading it with a screen reader. Now, I'm going to pop up the screen reader again, and I'm going to show you a navigation technique that screen reader users will employ to navigate a page, not unlike a sighted person would too.
VoiceOver on Chrome, accessible university demo site, accept headings menu. You are currently in the VoiceOver menu. Heading level 1, accessible university, in heading level 2, featured story slideshow, heading level 2, welcome. Heading level 2, heading level 2, apply now, heading level 2, apply now. You are currently on a heading VoiceOver off.
As a sighted person might look at a page and scan by headings, so too can a person with a screen reader navigate the content if it's been marked up correctly. Now, if you said that you're using a content management system and you wanted to make a heading look like a heading and you just grabbed it, made it bigger and bold, you can see that you're denying the level of access that a sighted person would have to a person without sight programmatically. And so if we look at the people who are most affected by that, that would be, first of all, that's success criteria 1.3.1, information relationship. Obviously non-sighted users, but also people with low vision who turn off style sheets, for example. So I'll run here, we could probably do the next two things, color contrast. So in this, I'm going to use the Wave toolbar with it. It's a Chrome extension. Now you can put this in Firefox, and you can put this just as a website and run the page through, and it'll do the same analysis for you. Automated checkers have a place in accessibility testing. They are not the accessibility test. Does that make sense? I'm going to catch about 25% of the actual defects that are present on a page using an automated checker. The other 75% are heuristic and manual checks. Unless there's some guiding light that's going to come out of the next presentation, I think that's going to be true until some advanced machine learning comes in and can really judge context. Because I can see if there's alternative text placed on something, but how do I know if it's gibberish? How do I know if it's decorative? That's a human, can I get a mic? Thank you.
You were talking about heuristics. I mean, if I remember, EPS uses has like a checklist for people to use, which is most programmers don't have any. I mean, I use Wave or X or something like that, and then I have my mental checklist.
Exactly.
But is there something out there, you know, like that I could grab, or you know?
I feel like you want me to say yes. There are checklists, yeah. The checklists are going to be manual ways for you to do the work that you have to do as a human to review the content. There's really just no complete substitute, Mr. Oh.
Well, Matt, next session, he will be presenting a tool that VF4 is building. That is a JAWS inspector tool, and that gives you a pretty detailed report each and every element. It's alpha version as of now, and they will be working on it in the future, but they're coming pretty good.
So we had a question in the back too from
Yeah.
Dan. In the interest of time, I'd like to get the mic up there. Sorry. We'll stay in chat. Let in the mic.
What I also do is I suggest a lot of my developers use the Links browser. It's been out for decades. It doesn't do images, doesn't do scripting, but when you fire up a web page and look at it, it'll give you a quick view of a rough estimate of what a screen reader will give you, but you can scan it quickly, and if there are glaring errors, they'll usually stick out at that point. So between that and keyboard only, that may answer your wonder.
What was it called?
Links, LYNX.
LYNX. Out on my screen, I have some color contrast violations. So I ran the WebAIMS Wave tool, and I started in the styles navigation item, and I'm going to go over to the contrast. Okay, and then I'm going to pick the first violation that I see, and I see that it fails for small text and it fails for large text. One of the neat things about this tool is it can also help you find a color contrast combination that will work. So if I hit this darker button, I can keep pushing it until it passes for small text. Small text has a contrast ratio requirement of 4.5 to 1. Large text has a contrast ratio of 3 to 1. So it's just about the text on its background. Okay, so we can see that this kind of light lavender color on a tan background fails for contrast unless we make it far darker. One of the things that Dan was alluding to too, we can simulate how assistive technology would interact with the page by turning off all the styles on the page as well. So we can start to see some error. In this case, this is the page that is broken. So we have visually formatted headings that are not programmatically marked up as headings, and so on. Some of the other things that come through when I do the test of the proper page are these indications that we have elements. So on the page that's been marked up correctly, we can see that the headings are exposed to us using this tool. We can also see that the language that is assigned is exposed to us in this tool. So again, I'll recap. Automated testing has a place in accessibility testing. It is not the accessibility test. Okay? It's a great tool if you're developing to keep testing your work. You put something up, test it, put something up, test it. You catch really stupid mistakes that you would make. Okay, but it is not going to give you the level of detail of a human reviewer. At this time, our intention is to throw the presentation over to our guest. He's on, of course he is. Let me put this up. I'm going to move my captions this time. And I am going to make Matt Ader the presenter.
I think I was going to write the slides first.
I'm going to turn it over to Mark Hakkinen.
I think so. I am not Matt Ader.
This is Matt Ader stand-in, Mark Hakkinen.
Yeah, so let's just try. So are we hearing?
You should be hearing this out of this. You should be hearing,
Okay, Matt, are you there? Can you say something?
that's me, but this, you should be coming out of here into the system. Here's that. Where's your input to the system?
Yes, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Make sure that your output is, hello?
Hello, Matt.
Blink twice if you can hear us, Matt.
Okay. I'm not sure we're hearing him. We
We have to listen up there and tell you if he's on the Skype.
We'll go to plan down home directly.
Okay.
So let me listen now.
In accessibility, you learn to improvise frequently.
So his microphone is definitely not muted.
Okay.
You're
Matt,
muted.
if you hear us say something,
Or chat with us.
hello, Matt.
Yeah, I'm not here.
Okay, I think what I'm gonna do is we're gonna not waste time. I'm going to call him on his cell phone. And we should still be able to share his screen.
Yeah, there's no sound coming through on the
Just a
Skype.
second. Let me just try to do this on the phone. Hey, technology is great, Matt. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use the audio from the phone call. You're going to be coming out of my phone on speaker, and or I think we're going to try this one.
Can't he speak into the Skype? I'm not hearing him on this. Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, just wait 1 second. I think we're going to try to hear you, and
Because this doesn't go out into the house. It only goes to the stream. That line only goes to the stream. It doesn't go
Okay,
out to the
so-
house.
Matt, should we just do the microphone? The room mic? I can hear you, Matt. We're hearing you through the phone.
Is his mic switched on in Skype or is he muted or something?
Is your mic switched on in Skype?
Do I have these settings on? Do you want me to try to change the speakers?
No, built-in speakers should be built-in output. That's good. Built-in. That's all good.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you want to plug this into the house, and then we'll hear him, but I won't have the audio.
Okay, well, I think we need to try to keep this moving, so.
Let's try this into your phone.
Okay, so,
But then I don't have the audio.
Matt?
Yes.
Oh,
Hey.
hey!
We can hear you.
Yay.
What am I talking through? Okay.
Can you hear us?
Am I talking through the microphone or my phone?
I think the phone.
Okay, all right. Two things talking to me at once. I don't know if I can handle it. All right, good. Good afternoon or evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So Matt, I have your slides up, and I'm going to.
Excellent.
I guess I'm going to play the slideshow. Should work.
I love it. Love it. And I apologize. We'll do a video at some point so we can get a better view of this in the future for you guys. Because right now a slideshow is only it's a portion of it, right?
Oh. I guess, wait a second. Yeah.
Let me make sure that I've duplicated my.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, we're still fussing here. Why don't you introduce yourself, Matt, because...
Yeah.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you. So my name is Matt Ader. I am the general manager for the Paciella Group. I've been with the Paciella Group for, I guess, I don't know, it feels like 6 months now. I am originally part of Freedom Scientific and BFO, and my job is to manage accessibility projects for our company.
Okay.
I've been in the field for probably 25 years now, but as most of you probably know, what we would call accessibility 20 years ago was probably more assistive technology. But obviously it's all converted at this point. Mark, do we have slides?
We are up on slides, so I got your title
All
slide.
right, cool. So testing made simple. Now, understand that, you know, as the last gentleman said, there's a lot of things around testing, and one of the things that we looked at for the last 2 years within VFO and now TPG is to say, you know, people were using screen readers and they didn't necessarily know how to use them. And so one of the things that we looked at is how could we use some of our technology to advance the ability for people to gather data from it without having to listen to a screen reader. Now, one of the things that we talked about in the last presentation was the concept of actually doing workflows and some other things like that. I don't think anything we're talking about today is going to replace user testing and going through workflows, but we'll talk and kind of give an example of how we are looking to kind of gather data going forward so that it makes it easier for the developer, QA, and so on to be able to validate information. Next slide.
Okay, so which
All
slide?
right. It says the problem, and so we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, so beyond
All
the
right,
problem.
so assistive technology testing should be the next slide.
Okay, got it.
All right. Difficult to test multitask with JAWS speech as I'm proving right now, because in one ear JAWS is talking and for some reason I'm trying to talk at the same time. Difficult to do multitask. And it's, I think it's also a lot to do with, can people understand it and do they know all of the keystrokes? And when we look at all of those things combined and understanding the developer and the person doing QA, do they actually have the time to learn all of these other components? All right, next slide.
Okay.
The solution. So what does JAWS inspect? Basically, we're trying to remove some of the components that I talked about before. We're trying to strip out the speech, trying to strip out the keystrokes and say, hey, if you want to use a screen reader to see what a screen reader will gather data and how it's going to report the data, we can do that better by running a tool that's going to gather it as a report and then allow you to use that information as artifacts that you can actually then share with development teams, put into bug reports and things of that nature. Next slide. Some of the benefits. You get a dedicated testing product out of JAWS. You get a text transcript of everything JAWS would say on the page. Speedy identification for you to kind of visualize and go through that. Obviously, this is talking about somebody with sight visualizing it. Somebody who's blind could also use a screen reader with this product. It's fully accessible, so they can go through this information as well. You can deploy this to as many people as you want. Licensing models like JAWS allow you to use license servers and other kind of mechanisms so that you can have a per-use model. And you can demonstrate the impact to the user. And this is similar to what you would do if you ran a screen reader, but again, trying to capture what the screen reader would say takes time using things like history mode and things, copy and paste and things like that. Next slide. Getting started right away. What you're seeing on this screen is a menu. And there's 4 functions within JAWS Inspect, and we'll kind of go through these without me being able to present. I can't demo this function in a demo mode, but we'll make sure I get Mark a video that you guys can share among everybody. The first one is a full page report. So with a control right click or a control applications key for a keyboard only user, you get a menu that looks like this, and you can run a full page report. You can do an element under mouse, you can do an element properties, and then you can do a live region report. We'll go to the next slide. This is what a full page report looks like. This is kind of hard to look at because it's just, right now everything's collapsed. But similar to using like a screen reader, for those who know the keystrokes, you could, press a keystroke in screen readers today to get a list of links. You can get a list of form controls, get a list of headings, get a list of regions. I'll just use those 4 as examples right now. And images is another fun one, right? And so each one of these is buried into this report. When you click or press enter on a button that expands that report, it's going to show you all the details. And we'll kind of zoom in now when I press go to the next slide, please, Mark. It says Analyze JAWS Output, I believe is the title of this one.
Yes.
So you're actually going to see what JAWS would have said. Then you're going to see the extra information that JAWS says along with it, such as link, and that's going to be bold and italic so that it stands out for the person who's actually visualizing this report. For a screen reader user, they already know that it's going to say that, so obviously you could turn on Text Analyzer to actually speak the fact that it changed those fonts, but I don't, myself, I don't care about that. It does a screenshot of the link form control graphic, provides a code so you can actually click and have it expand the code so you can see the actual code for that element, and then a unique ID for issue tracking. So if you had to upload this into a database or into a reporting system, it allows you to go back to the base report to validate where it came from. Go to the next slide. And now up here it says user issues clearly shown. To look at this report, I mean, it says here that you don't need accessibility expertise. I would partially disagree with that. That's a marketing guy decided to put a line up there. Don't tell him I said that, by the way. You know, did someone laugh in the room at least? Somebody did, right? The idea is that if you start spotting things that, for example, I was on CNN.com today, and when I did a full page report, I saw something called slash link. And there's a link on the page that appears as a slash, and that's it. I can obviously now say the screen reader user is not going to know what that means. And then I'm going to go in here and click the code, see the fact that they didn't label it correctly. I have an image of it. I think some of these may be, like, of course you're asking if I got to look at the images on my screen, but I think these images may be like Facebook and other images on the screen right here. All right, next slide. This one's an element under mouse report. So if you're a mouse user or a keyboard user with, you can use a control applications key, you can get a report off of just one element rather than the entire page. This is useful because if you're only just looking at one sample or one object, it's a little faster for you. I actually like the next one, the element properties, and I believe I'm going to skip past just the menu on this one.
Can I interject a moment? Could you
Slide.
Matt, could you speak a little closer to the phone? We're losing the audio.
Oh yeah, sorry. How about now?
That sounds good.
Okay, loud and clear, like my DJ voice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did get a broadcasting degree. All right, we're going to go slide 13, focus on the element. So this is the one I like the most. So from a individual element by element concept, you can bring up this dialogue and then you can actually go up parent by parent, see the actual, within the DOM, see it go back up through the tree. You can see how JAWS would report it. You can see the code. You can actually copy that section out if you need to report that section. So this allows somebody to kind of work in tandem as they're sitting on a site right now. Go to the next slide. And this is an ARIA Live report. So you get to an ARIA Live, a page with an ARIA Live, you run the report, and then it's going to actually show you what the screen reader is going to say and tell you, is this ARIA polite or ARIA Live polite? I made up one today. It's called argumentative. You guys have heard of that one, right? So there's, whatever the different ARIA Live components are, they'd be shown in this window as well. It's a very handy tool for people trying to figure out what the live region is going to actually expose once you actually launch it. All right, the roadmap. Fast forward, you should be on that slide.
Yep.
I'm trying to move at a good pace because I know we're clocking out on time in another 5-10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'll leave that time for questions. So coming in 2018, customized reports, be able to export directly to bug trackers. Today, every report can be exported as a CSV file and as a flat file you could parse. So you could use that data yourself, but it's going to be a little bit easier when we can, say, export directly to Jira or whatever bug tracking system is needed. Full transcript, so that'd be like a say all kind of report. Comparing the DOM with JAWS. With JAWS speech would also be a future thing. There's another 20 things on the roadmap that I'm not going to share because then it's just a teaser and people just say, when's that going to happen? So let's see, and I think that's the last slide, Mark.
I think it is.
So hopefully I left enough time for questions considering I can't do a demo. I could try to log in with another computer if need be.
How soon will there be a public beta or a commercial release?
Public beta, I believe, is next week. And then the commercial release, so yeah, I mean, let's be honest, next week is Thanksgiving, so I believe, let's just put it as the following week, the 27th. And then the commercial release is the 18th of December.
How do we get on the beta?
You can email me and Mark can provide my email address.
Great. And is there a commercial pricing for it?
We're still working out pricing. There's going to be different models for universities and nonprofits, and different models for enterprises and corporate structure. It can run on a license server, it can run individual licenses if need be, and then there's the more corporate, which is unlimited license model as well.
Okay, are there other questions? Jason White has a question for you, Matt.
Very good
Hey,
evening.
Jason.
Very good evening, Matt. So I'm just interested to know whether it can show you the ARIA state changes, for example, that take place when someone is interacting with a JavaScript application, whether it will also show what's being delivered by the accessibility APIs in case there's a browser bug that's preventing the right information from being conveyed. To put that in short, how does it address the accessibility of complex interactive components?
So I had a hard time hearing what you said there. Are you speaking specifically around ARIA Live or something else?
Matt, if you can hear me, I'll try to translate what Jason said.
Yeah.
It's an Australian accent, probably. So what Jason is asking, whether the JavaSpec tool will reflect the dynamic changing of ARIA states. So if you have ARIA check states or collapse states, will those be easily identifiable?
They will be identifiable, not in a, how do I put this? It's not going to show the changing, it's going to show the current state when you run the report. So I was on a page earlier today as an example, and there was buttons, but they were all disabled. So they weren't going to show up. JAWS didn't actually give any output because they didn't exist. But they did exist in the DOM somewhere, so they showed up, but then they're all showed up as disabled, so the screen reader's never going to see it. Is that what you were kind of indicating, or like where the things get hidden true or false and that kind of stuff?
Well, Jason?
So I don't know whether you can hear me this time or not, but yes, I was basically asking whether, so in order to know whether a change occurred properly in a state, for example, you'd have to run a report before and a report after and compare them in that case?
I would estimate that is the way it is today, but I believe those things are in the roadmap. Because right now it's we're not using a headless browser to kind of run through this stuff. We're using, the browser at the time. So I think you should watch where those features get added, and as you get into a beta cycle, and if you try it out and you have these kind of feature requests, we'll have a process for you to ask for these feature updates. Our plan is to have features rolled out every 3 months.
Great. Other questions?
Any other question?
No other questions? So Matt, you think you may share a video of JAWS inspect and operation that we could also post to our meetup site?
Yeah, I'll work on that for you probably in the next couple days, and we'll get one over to you.
Great. If there are no other questions, are there any other updates you want to share from VFO, such as the release of JAWS 2018?
Yeah, I think the main thing for people who are using a screen reader, and let's just use JAWS as the example here. In JAWS 2018, one of the features I like the most is the web verbosity feature. So we all agree that screen readers get a little bit noisy, and sometimes it's hard to focus on the relevant data. And so if you pull up the settings center and type in web verbosity, you can actually, it by default will be on medium. You do not want it on high or you may go completely insane. And low will actually reduce quite a bit of noise, but you can also go in and actually modify each one. So you get tired of hearing the word region when you get to regions and you just want to hear the content. You can mute, each type of region. You could say just mute all article regions, for example, which websites like CNN.com, where they have 38 article regions, get very noisy and cumbersome. And so I think it's probably my favorite feature of JAWS 2018 because it allows me as a user to reduce noise. The other feature that I think most people missed in JAWS 18, probably midsummer, if you're using Windows 10, you can actually have it highlight what JAWS is reading on the page as it's reading it. Now, it's only reading it if you're using the virtual cursor, though, but it's an important feature to have, but it only works in Windows 10.
Interesting. Any questions about JAWS that Matt can answer?
Hey Matt, this is Irfan. I have a question about the new browser that came in yesterday on Friday, Firefox Quantum. Did you get a chance to see how the JAWS works with the Quantum and if you are keeping an eye on that?
Well, I have disabled my update for Firefox 57 right now, based on all the blogs and posts that were out there. I know that there's some encouragement by people to keep it running and test it and provide feedback, but I'm going to wait another cycle before I start doing that because I have to be productive at work. I personally don't want to go back and use IE, so I'm running Chrome and Firefox is my default browser, to switch between them depending on which computer I'm on. And I spend probably more time in Chrome today than I actually do Firefox, but we're watching this one. I know our developers are working with their developers to try to resolve the issues.
Okay, great. So I think if we have no other questions for you right now, Matt, we're all going to be anxiously awaiting the beta of JAWS Inspect. Those of us who do accessibility testing or have people doing accessibility testing in our groups. And I wanted to say one complimentary thing for you guys at VFO, and that's your commitment to accessibility standards work within W3C. And I know that it's sometimes difficult to get the assistive technology vendors involved in standards work, and I just want to say that we're all happy to see the commitment, both originally from the Paciello group, but now also from people like Glenn Gordon, who was one of the key people behind the creation of JAWS. So I give you a little...
I appreciate that, Mark. It's it really is great, and I think that when you see the impact on VFO by the Paciello group, by coming in and really pushing this, will help the rest of the community. And so you're seeing great involvement. You see things like the JAWS Open Bug Tracker for web developers. If you're not familiar with that, you can share that information, Mark. I think that's fabulous stuff that Steve Faulkner did on the Paciello group side, so that developers could post web bugs about these products. And the best way to do it is to have a community resource for this. So having Glenn show up at the ARIA working groups in San Francisco last week was great. And that's the first time that's ever happened. And it's a lot to do with the folks at the Paciello group pushing VFO more towards the collaborative side of the street than behind the fences streets.
Yes, and it was wonderful to have Glenn Gordon present at the meeting last week, and we hope he agrees that it was a very productive meeting.
Excellent. Great. So it sounds like a few of you guys were in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yes, now we've got to push your competitors to do the same. Or not.
Is there any left?
Who haven't bought recently?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for having me. And next time I'm up in your area, I'll join one of these meetups.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Matt. And have fun at AHEAD, which I think is where you are at today.
I am.
Okay,
It's a great time.
okay, very
Thank you
good.
very much.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna hang up.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I think we just ended the call. This actually worked better than I thought it would. So, Joel, what do we want to do with,
That's good, you're good, I'm on the other mic.
okay, so,
Let's wrap it up.
I do think I should mention the issue with Firefox. So, if you haven't heard, Firefox 57, which is a quantum release that came out on November 14th, no longer works effectively with screen reading products. They made architectural changes for performance, which have now significantly caused performance issues when assistive technologies query and build their accessibility tree. So the recommendation is, if you're doing anything with accessibility and use Firefox and a screen reader, don't upgrade. They do have recommendation for what's called the extended service release version of Firefox, which I think is what, version 54 or 55 or something like that. Anyway, we can also share that information on the Meetup site, because it is important. You might find people who are suddenly unable to use their screen reader, but they're using Firefox.
So I would suggest use Chrome. Chrome is still the best browser available.
That's a matter of opinion, but
Expert testimony, that's it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, Mozilla just acquired some good accessibility talent, so we can expect them to address their architectural problems for the Microsoft Windows environment.
Yeah, Jason's comment wasn't really on Mike, but Jamie Tay, who was one of the co-developers, founders of the NVDA screen reader, also another one of these Australians who are involved in accessibility, has joined the Mozilla Foundation. And so we believe he's hard at work on the Firefox accessibility issues. So, I think you need to make some announcements about what's coming up next.
Oh, so the next meetup will be in January. We are going to be having Thomas Logan of Equal Entry and the A11Y Meetup present on their submission to a contest on accessibility.
I think it's like some kind of New York, Barcelona
Yeah.
pedestrian accessibility effort.
So that'll be in the discussion about of accessibility in the physical space. February, we're going to do accessibility and usability, so beyond compliance. We're talking about the confluence of usability studies and accessibility. March is open, April is open, and May, routines do we have in May?
We have a tentative that maybe Jason White can comment on, since he's the one who has done some of that discussion along with Chris Ann. That's just the little.
Yeah, so we're looking at next year, we're trying to find out whether Judy Brewer from the W3C might be available to give a presentation, and we're still working on that, so we'll let you know whether that's possible. She has an extremely heavy schedule, so we'll just have to see.
And yeah, that would conclude our activities for the night. Thank you for coming very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you in January.